Welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video, we're going to be covering the Toronto Raptors in an offseason preview. Of course, we've been trying to get to every single NBA team for an offseason preview. If we have not recorded your team yet, go ahead and request them right now in the comment section. Again, the hope is to get to all 30 NBA teams before the NBA draft. I think we're doing a pretty good job. We've covered most of them. We're just trying to catch up with all the others. Working a ton outside of doing YouTube, trying to bring the best content. We're upgrading some stuff here and there. We've got a couple of fun announcements coming as well. By the time this video comes out, maybe that announcement will have already been made. So check out the channel and see if that's on there. If you can't tell right away, you'll know it's not. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying the content. Now let's get into it. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like. And for the video preview here covering the Toronto Raptors, we're going to go through this offseason preview like we do all the rest of them. We're going to take a look back at this past season. What did I notice from this Toronto team? What did I learn? And really what stood out to me with their record, their bright spots, how the season ended for them. Then we move into key decisions to make. And Masai Ujiri, one of the best in the business, he's got a big question in front of him right now. And of course, the media is blowing everything out of proportion. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the situation. Raptors fans, I'm sure you guys know exactly which situation I'm alluding to. Then the 2022 NBA draft is right around the corner. We're a couple weeks away now at this point. We're going to look at the draft assets that the Toronto Raptors have and then who they could potentially target with that draft asset. And then you move into 2022 NBA free agency, where you look at the cap space, the targets that they could look at, maybe a key player or two that they would like to retain, and really evaluate how Toronto can move forward into next season, where you look at some of the goals and expectations that Toronto is going to place on itself. And then I myself expect from this franchise and this organization that is very well run. Real quick too, if you're a Raptors fan, I just want to say how lucky you are. The Raptors are such a well-run organization, honestly, from top to bottom. I firmly believe that. And it's really awesome because when you look at this past season, the one that just transpired, this team won 48 games, which I don't think a lot of people are expecting. I tried telling people that this Raptors team was going to be back and they were going to be better than they were when they were in Tampa, because quite frankly, you're playing back at home. Obviously, they didn't really have fans for most of the season there, but players are sleeping in their own beds again. They're back at home. Everyone's more comfortable. And it was just a massive down year when they were in Tampa. Everything kind of went wrong that could. Moving off of Kyle Lowry at the right time, it was perfect for this team. And just everything went right. And Toronto, to be honest with you, even though I was warning people to watch out for this team, I didn't think it would be to the tune of 48 wins. I thought maybe this team will win 42-ish games, 43 games, probably be like a 7 or 8 seed, make the playoffs. No, they were a 5 seed in the East, and it's a really good Eastern Conference. This is not your father's Eastern Conference. It's a brand new beast out East, and I really do enjoy watching all these Eastern Conference teams and all these Eastern Conference games, because the Toronto Raptors are right in the thick of things there out East. And when you look at the bright spots, it's not surprising to see why they were so good. Scotty Barnes, who was a phenomenal rookie, of course, had such a great season as a rookie with the Toronto Raptors. And I tried telling everybody on draft night, Raptors fans, I tried telling you guys, Scotty Barnes was the right selection. I gave it an A+ on draft night. A lot of people wanted Jalen Suggs. And I even had people in my video on draft night saying that they're hoping I'm right, because Scotty Barnes over Jalen Suggs was not the consensus at the time. But Masai Ujiri showed why he is such a good executive and how he's so good at talent evaluation. Scotty Barnes, the length, the size, the playmaking, everything he can do with the basketball and without it on the defensive end really fit not only what this team wanted, but what this team needed specifically for Nick Nurse. He's a very Nick Nurse type of player because he's got the length, he's versatile, can play him at center field essentially for this defense, and he just creates a lot of havoc, and it lets other players on this roster do things that they're good at. For example, Pascal Siakam could do more offensively this year, kind of found a rhythm, ended up being an all-NBA selection, which I'm really happy for him. I didn't think he would quite get in, but he did make it onto the all-NBA third team, and I think it's fairly well-deserved too when you look at what happened. Of course, it's a weaker forward pool this year with no Kawhi Leonard. Paul George missed most of the season. Anthony Davis missed most of the year. It did kind of weaken the forward pool for all-NBA, but still, that accolade is on his resume, and it was well-deserved this season. Fred VanVleet, another good year from the point guard there in Toronto. And it's just another testament to how good this organization is. The fact that they went from Kyle Lowry to Fred VanVleet. They have these 2 point guards that one was really a definition of their franchise 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And I think Fred VanVleet's right at the heart of what this franchise is now, and is all about competitive basketball. They have an undersized point guard, but works on both ends of the floor. He's a phenomenal player, and I'm really happy that he actually stuck in Toronto when he was a free agent a couple of years ago. I was worried that, maybe he'll head somewhere else, get a bigger contract. And I think Toronto did a real solid here, keeping him around. Then you look at Gary Trent Jr., again, another example of Masai Ujiri just doing his job really well. On trade deadline day, when they made a move 2 years ago with the Portland Trailblazers trading Norm Powell for Gary Trent Jr., I did not understand the deal from Portland's perspective. I knew they wanted to win. I just did not think Norm Powell was the guy to get it done. I love Gary Trent's upside on both ends of the floor. Good physical defender who I thought was capable of doing more offensively had he been given that opportunity. And I think he showcased that this year with Toronto. This team had such good talent, specifically across their top 5 or 6 players there. And you look at one of the best 5-man, 6-man rotations in the league, honestly, there's not really a deficiency anywhere. I think now if you consider the depth, that's where you have to find a little bit more stuff. But for the bright spot as talent, the talent's there, specifically at the top. Maybe they don't have the true superstar quite yet. Maybe Scotty Barnes can become that. I was hopeful of that before the NBA draft this past year, that maybe he could unlock that. Now, I think he's got to develop in some areas yet, but his rookie season was a great starting point to what his ultimate career is going to look like. And then Nick Nurse, my favorite coach in the NBA. I think he's the smartest and best NBA head coach as of right now. Ime Udoka, I think, is pushing for that. Steve Kerr's got a little bit of stake in the ground as well with all of his success in Golden State. But Nick Nurse, I think, does the most with what he has most consistently. And he's the most innovative, the most creative, and honestly, the most crazy head coach in the NBA. And I say that in a good way. He's willing to try anything. I myself, when I'm coaching at the high school level, and in the future, I'm hoping to coach at higher levels, I feel like I really align well with what Nick Nurse wants to do in terms of going all out, trying to win every game, throwing in half-court traps and, making stuff happen, trying to win, using length, size, versatility. I believe in all the stuff Nick Nurse does, and I think if he gets a little bit more offensive talent on this team, we could talk about Toronto maybe getting back to the NBA Finals, because you look at the last time he had a true superstar, he had Kawhi Leonard for 1 year, and they won a championship. That's enough said. I think Nick Nurse is that type of coach, and I think he's honestly such a good piece for the Raptors to have in that coaching staff. Moving into a key decision to make, and it's OG Anunoby, who was a little banged up this past year, missed around 30 games. And supposedly, according to media reports, he's supposedly discontent with his role there in Toronto. And you have to understand why he would be feeling that way. First of all, the offense runs through Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes now. That's the 3. And then Gary Trent Jr. works off of that. And OG Anunoby is a player who he's probably good enough to not have to work off of that. He's probably too good to have to work off of that. But ultimately, for the good of the Raptors, you want to have all these great, awesome players on the floor, and you want to be utilizing all of their talents, which puts everyone in a state of flux. And at some point, someone might feel left out. So I'm not saying that these reports are 100% true, but if they are, you have to understand where OG Anunoby is coming from here. And I hope this doesn't create any animosity between the fan base and Anunoby, because I know he's one of the most beloved players in that organization. I know fans really do love him, and I understand why. He's a great young player who's had some really meaningful moments with that franchise, has made some huge plays for them, including a buzzer beater game-winning 3 in the postseason at one point. He's a very talented young player who has a lot more left in the tank in terms of development. So will the Raptors look to move him with these reports? No, I think absolutely not. They will not move OG Anunoby. I would be shocked if Masai Ujiri did move OG Anunoby. The only way I think that there's anything potentially to come from this would be if Sacramento opened up pick 4 in a deal for OG Anunoby, and then maybe sent back someone along the lines of a Harrison Barnes. That maybe sounds a little bit rich to Kings fans, and I understand why, but OG Anunoby is a really talented young player. I don't think people around the league really give him the respect he deserves as a player. I mean, he could be a potential all-star down the road. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy into that, but If he ended up becoming a 1 or 2-time All-Star, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked, especially if he was in a bigger role, which is the thing he's discontent about. But Toronto, ultimately, they're going to focus on winning. They're going to try and give him his money when he's due for a contract extension. And ultimately, I think he stays in Toronto long term. Then we move into the NBA draft, and the Raptors last year absolutely killed it. They went out, got Scotty Barnes, and this is an organization that has a really good track record as well, even outside of the draft with undrafted free agents. You think about some of the players they've been able to bring in that way. A couple of years ago, they took Malachi Flynn in the second round. That's been an okay asset for them as well. And then Delano Banton in the second round last year out of Nebraska, the first ever Canadian-born player to be drafted by the Raptors, actually. And I think that was a sneaky good pickup as well. Someone who was pretty low on the radar of most NBA draft evaluators. I don't think anyone really expected him to get drafted, myself included, but played really well in the G League this past year, putting up 21 points a game down there in about 10 games. So smaller sample size, but was shooting really well from the field and from three. And I think if that can translate to the NBA, Toronto's got an interesting combination of length, size, athleticism, talent, ball handling. They're a good young team, but they do not own their first round pick this year or their second rounder. But they do have the Pistons second round pick, which is 33rd overall. So let's look at who they could potentially target there. And for me specifically, I'm looking at two real needs and then a couple other players that can fit around this roster currently. The two needs for me are a backup point guard behind Fred VanVleet, because I think even though Malachi Flynn, I don't think is a bad player, I think you can upgrade there. And I think at the center position, that's the obvious one, right? That's the one that Raptors fans are pleading for. Get us a center. We need a center. And I think a good rim protecting center would really flesh out Nick Nurse's overall team defense. So here's some potential targets. Looking at the point guard spot, Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame. If he falls to 33, could be a really nice pickup. My guess is he's going to go in the top 32, though. I really do believe that. If he doesn't go in the first round, he's going to be one of the first couple picks in the second round. He's a bigger guard at about 6'5". He's got playmaking and shot creation upside. I think he's got to, learn to read the game a little bit better, but I think he could fit into Toronto simply given his physical standpoint. He's a good athlete, 6'5" point guard again. Fits kind of what I think Masai Ujiri would be looking for. And then on the topic of what Masai Ujiri is looking for, Dalen Terry here out of Arizona is the exact replica of what Masai Ujiri would basically build in a point guard. You're looking at a 6'7" guy here who's got incredibly long arms, about a 7-foot wingspan, and someone who has almost a 9-foot standing reach at the point guard position. He's a good athlete, knows how to run an offense, did a lot of that for Arizona this past year around Ben Mathurin and Christian Koloko, who you also see on this list. Dalen Terry, I think, is a very underrated prospect, and if they could get him 33 overall, that would be really good value, and I also think would contribute to their team defense even more because of his length. And I just think he's an overall smart player after his sophomore season with the Wildcats. Ismail Kamagate, another player who, as a center for Paris this past season, showcased some real dominance as a rim protector. This is the missing element for Toronto defensively. Maybe they look at a Christian Koloko who's got decent athleticism to him. Some people liken him as a first-round worthy selection. I don't have a first-round grade on him, but I could see him going in the back end of the first round. And then there's two players here. We'll talk about Jean Montero at the very end. Obviously, I think Raptors fans would love him. But Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers just seems like a Masai Ujiri selection because he's such a smart overall player, specifically defensively. He's the son of a former NBA champion in Ron Harper, 5-time champion, by the way. And it'd be kind of funny having a Gary Trent Jr. and a Ron Harper Jr. on the same team. And I think Ron Harper Jr. would really build into the depth on this wing position. I think at times Nick Nurse felt a little handicapped by his lack of depth. His top 5 or top 6 are really good. I think that they've got some real contributors for sure. But I think they could use a little bit more wing depth, and I think Ron Harper Jr. could help that. Bryce McGowan's out of Nebraska, someone who's not ready to contribute right away. But after a couple seasons with the Raptors 905, I think he could probably find a role on this team as a creator off the bench. And Jean Montero, again, I think Raptors fans would love this selection. You guys all know why. When you look at what he could bring to this team, he's one of those smaller point guards, kind of what fits the transaction history of Masai Ujiri at the point guard spot, at least with Kyle Lowry and now also with Fred VanVleet. You throw Jean Montero in there, he's a nice playmaking guard, could probably get others involved, and maybe that's how you help solidify some of those concerns from OG Anunoby, you put him onto the second unit occasionally and let him be the go-to guy with Jean Montero feeding him. Could be an interesting outcome to watch for. Then we go into free agency, and this is where things get very interesting for Toronto. They're negative $27 million in cap space, and people always ask me, if they're that much in negative in cap space, how do they go out and make a move? How do they get better? What do they do? Well, the mid-level exception this year is $10.264 million, which means you could probably get a few good players on that deal. There's some good players out there that are going to be eligible for the mid-level exception, and Toronto can use theirs wisely on a couple different players that I think would fit some of their needs. So they'll have to determine which one player they want to give that to. They're $33 million away from the luxury tax, though. And that's important to note here, because if you include that $10.64 million in there, you have about $22 million or so to play with, probably closer to 20 just because of incentives. Sometimes you want to build out a little bit of space just in case a player hits an incentive, and then all of a sudden you're past the luxury tax. That could be really detrimental to your team. But Chris Boucher, Thad Young both headed toward free agency. They traded for Thad Young. Chris Boucher, they really grew him in from home with the Raptors 905, who I talked about earlier. I think Boucher is a phenomenal player who fits exactly into what Nick Nurse wants to do. So I think they're going to be very aggressive keeping Boucher. I don't really have a read on Thad Young at this point, if he's going to stay or go. I think he's probably lower on the totem pole for Toronto's concerns. So I think going into the actual free agency period, their main goal is to retain Chris Boucher using his bird rights. They can keep him in there. They can go way over the salary cap space, and he probably gets a deal around $8 to $10 million a year. And then you look at Tyus Jones here out of Memphis. If they want to look at that backup point guard spot, Tyus Jones is a great fit, because not only does he do the stuff offensively need him to do, like act as a backup floor general, and he's going to knock down some big shots, but he's also a pesky defender who can get in the passing lanes, can disrupt some stuff, plays bigger than he is. Or if you want to look at the center spot in free agency, I've got 4 good options here. Mo Bamba, do they give him an offer sheet to try and lure him away from Orlando? The players like Mo Bamba just work out so well in Nick Nurse's system. I think honestly his combination of size, athleticism, and shooting would be a really nice blend into what Toronto could really use around Scotty Barnes. Otherwise, if you want to go more the traditional center route, you could go JaVale McGee, who's a phenomenal role man. I think one of the most underrated role man in the entire NBA. Isaiah Hartenstein, a combination of kind of what JaVale and Bamba give you. He's not as consistent of a shooter. He's not as athletic, and he's not going to be as good of a roller, but he does a lot of the stuff. And he actually protects the rim really, really well. One of the most underrated rim protectors in the league. And it's not really with his shot blocking. It's just his ability to contest right around the rack. And then Andre Drummond, coming out of Brooklyn. He's a dominant player still on the glass. Now, he's not a dominant overall player. I'm not saying you can play him heavy playoff minutes, but throughout the duration of an NBA regular season, would Toronto be better if they got Andre Drummond on a minimum? 100% they would be. If you look at bringing in, say, Tyus Jones and Andre Drummond this offseason and adding that to the group you already have, Nick Nurse can probably feel more comfortable going 8 or maybe even 9 deep if they feel Delano Banton is more ready for NBA minutes. And I think ultimately there you have a combination of players that you feel very good about. So next season, what's the goal? Well, I think the internal goal, what Toronto is going to be pacing themselves for, is finishing top 4 in the East. And I don't necessarily just mean based on regular season standings, even though they would love that. They would love to have home court advantage in round 1. But I think it's make it past the first round. They're hungry for that. They made it to 6 games this year against the Philadelphia 76ers. And ultimately, you know, they were beat up, injured, and lost in that series. And I think they want to go further. And I think they're going to have a good shot at that. I think they'll at least have a competitive first round series next year that could go either way. And if Scotty Barnes takes a big step forward, like I'm projecting he will, they could become a lock to be a second round playoff team. And I know that doesn't sound super enticing. No one wants to be we're the second round playoff team that got bounced right before the conference finals. That's a really great thing to be in the NBA. It really is. It designates you as a top 8 team in the league. I don't think people really, quantify that enough. Top 8 in the league. That's how good you are if you make it to the second round of the playoffs. And then if you make it to the conference finals, which you're putting yourself in a position to at least almost get there, you're a top 4 team in the league. And then from there, anything can happen. Player goes down, something goes wrong, maybe you get hot shooting from three, and you win, and you make the NBA Finals, and then maybe, just maybe, you have enough luck to pull it all out. But I think Toronto, their goal, get to the second round of the playoffs and go from there. Hopefully you guys all did enjoy today's video. Raptors fans, if you are new to the channel, leave a like on today's video and subscribe. And if you're still watching at this point, comment "We the North" in the comment section. Lets me know that you guys are making it to the end of the video. Hopefully you have been enjoying the content here. Again, go ahead, request any other video ideas you would like to see as well in the comment section right now. We've been diversifying the content a little bit, still holding true to some of the main stuff that a lot of you are subscribed for though, so don't worry. All the great stuff's gonna be coming out with some even more fun stuff in addition. Thanks again so much for watching, guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.